So we're starting this study of Esther, which we have not done before. And this study in this book was written, so I was going through it, I was like, oh, this is great, because they give a lot of instructions as though it's a brand new person doing the study. So everything is spelled out. So if you are uncomfortable with, oh, how am I supposed to do that? It's going to tell you exactly what you should be doing. If you've been doing this a while and you're like, I don't need to know that, you just skip by it, okay? But it's because it's a small study that they're treating it like it's a beginner study for people as far as the directions go. So you want to have out for today your lesson 1. And then there are several pages in the appendix. One is called, let's see, so you want page 77, 73, okay, 71, 73, 77, and 79. '71, 73, 77, and 79.
And 79.
Right. And then we're going to be looking at chapter 1 of Esther, which you will also find in the back. Sorry, I don't have that page number. You have the whole text of Esther in the back, but we'll just need to look at chapter
45
1.
and 47.
Saw the admonishment about not to read ahead.
Oh, you already read that?
I just glanced at it at the front.
Okay,
I
good.
saw that, yes.
Good. Yeah. I mean, there's no police that's going to stop you, but it's just like, take it as we go here. Okay, so what we have, I'm going to just kind of walk through these instructions. And Dave already mentioned that it says don't read ahead. On this page 1, it talks about, if you want a good story, you'll find it in the book of Esther. It's a book you don't want to put down, especially if you are reading it for the first time, because it is short and fast moving. You're eager to see how it all turns out. You're eager to know what will happen to the hero and the heroine. Heroine. Is that I keep thinking it's a drug,
Mhm.
Yeah. Did I say that wrong?
No, I think that's right.
Okay, the people, the villain. Will the king be deceived? A pawn of those who serve him. Who will live? Who will die? Intriguing story. But it says, at the bottom line there, it says, it is for this reason that we are going to ask you restrain yourself and move with us through this book chapter by chapter. Don't read ahead, just let the story unfold. It's okay if you read ahead, but it says don't do it, but if you want to, I'm not going to stop you. Okay. All right.
Don't read the Bible.
Don't, exactly. See, I can't say that. I cannot say that. Don't read the Bible. I had a kid in my Bible study at CMI once. We were studying Moses, and we were just taking it little by little. And one day he came to class and he said, Linda, I'm so sorry, but I was reading ahead because it's so exciting. And then I'm like, no reading ahead in the Bible. You cannot do that. But he was apologetic because he was so excited about what he was seeing. I'm like, no, read all you want, read the whole thing. Right. So, okay, so let's look at day 1, number 2. Number 2. So when you study a book of the Bible, it is important to identify the type of literature. Understanding the type of literature helps you understand how you approach it, what you're going to learn from it. So, it says, in the appendix, you'll find chapter 1 of Esther. So what I want you to do right now is to read chapter 1. I'm just going to have you read it on your own. Take 2 or 3 minutes here. And try to determine what type of literature is it. What do you see as you read? Is it history? Is it poetry? Is it wisdom literature? Or is it prophecy? So read it, and as you read it, kind of pay attention to main characters, what kind of literature it is. reading it? Yeah. So what do you think? Is it history, poetry, prophecy, wisdom literature?
History.
History.
Okay, history. Why do you say history?
Very detailed about events, things that happen.
Very detailed about events,
Places.
places, right?
You could also call it wisdom literature.
Yeah.
That'd be a second.
Yeah, second choice, yeah. But yes, when you start out reading about kings and places and dates and those kinds of things, it's like, oh, this is history. These are facts. So it's history. And if you didn't get that on your own reading it, look at number 3. Yes. As you read historical narrative, so there's the clue. It's like, as you read historical narrative, then it talks about time and people, places and people. Those are going to be the key things. And I say this all the time. Those are the most obvious things to understand in a book. Facts about people and places. Facts about people and places. So what we're going to do now is look again at this chapter 1. And it says, as you read, you want to begin getting the facts. Like any good journalist, you need to ask the 5 W's and the H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. And doing that is going to help you to just take apart any portion of Scripture. Ask those questions. So let's begin. Let's look at chapter 1. We're not going to read it again, but we're going to answer these questions. Who are the main characters in Esther in chapter 1?
King Xerxes and Queen Vashti.
Okay, the king and Vashti, the queen. Okay, so we have the king. Now, here's the thing about this king and his name. We have to decide what we're going to call him. Okay, because the name, as it says here, is King. Anybody want to venture?
Azarus.
Okay, Azarus. The
So it's like another A.
Hazarus, you know.
Hazarus.
Yeah, it's and when I looked it up, the Hebrew, it pronounces it like Hazweras, something like that.
Oh.
Okay, you don't even say the first A, and then the Greek spelling of this is Xerxes. It's Xerxes. So he is referred to as Xerxes, which we will see on the timeline in a little bit in this week. But Xerxes is more common to us than the other, and I think for our purposes, there's only one king in the story, so we can just call him the king. Okay,
Yes.
and then we're done with that. We have the king, one king. But that's just the background on the king. So you have the king, and you have Vashti, who is, what is her role?
Queen.
The queen. She's the queen. So on this page 3, it says to write down who are the main characters in chapter 1. Those are the 2 main characters in chapter 1. The next question is, what is happening? So we have the who, now we're asking the what. What is happening in this chapter? Somebody just give me this.
This party.
There was a banquet, and what happened?
Well, the women weren't even considered to be the least of the people in Susa, so they weren't at it.
Okay, where were the women?
They were having their own party.
They were having their own party. That's
Women's
always-
Ministries party.
Yeah, right, that's right. It was an embrace party. It was an embrace group.
Great group.
Yes, an embrace group. So what was the main event in this chapter? What significant thing happened in this chapter?
He summons the queen.
Okay, so the king is having a banquet, and he summons the queen. What happens?
She doesn't come.
She says, nope. Well, because he wanted to just parade her in front of all his guests. It was like entertainment.
Yeah,
It was like entertainment.
yeah.
The
And why did he want to do that?
She was
She was
beautiful.
beautiful.
Because she was beautiful.
To the people and the princes.
Yeah, because she was beautiful. verse 11, it says, he summoned, he asked them to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and the princes, for she was beautiful. Okay, so he's like, I am so proud of her. I want to show her off to all these people. He's on this
His
banquet.
trophy.
Okay. So she, what? Refuses to come. Then what's the problem with that?
Disobeyed.
She disobeyed the king. She disobeyed the king. So then what happens? And I know you just had a first time reading of this, but what happens because she disobeyed the king?
The king was angry.
He was angry.
Consults the law.
So they consult the law. They consult the wise people. What are we going to do about this? Why do they need to do anything about it?
Well, because all the women might follow her direction and not submit to their husbands when they
Right.
said, come on, do this.
Right.
Pray before your
Right.
friends.
Right. So I'm thinking, any guy who reads just chapter 1 of this story would just be so happy.
This is not bad.
That's right. Every guy should want to study this book because of that edict that was sent out that says that every man should be the master of his own house. So there you have it, men. It's probably not going to get better after that. So, okay. So that's the gist of the first chapter. Who are the main people? The king, the queen. What happened? The king gave a banquet. He asked the queen to come to it. She refused. So that's the basic of what is happening. Just to kind of sum it up really quickly. And so that created a problem. Okay, so that's the who and the what. Verse number 4 on page 3, number 4, underneath your little chart there. It says, what does the narrative tell you about where the chapter is happening?
Susa.
Okay, in Susa. In Susa. What do we know about Susa there?
Looks like it's a citadel right in the middle of all the country he controlled.
Okay, it's the citadel. It's where the king's palace is, right? So it's a location. And in the instructions here, it says that to mark geographical locations, it says to double underline it with green. So if you have here Susa, I'm going to use this wall because it's a hint. Susa is a location. Especially in historical books, you want to mark locations, any geographical location, because it's going to really tell you where things are happening, and sometimes that's going to be really helpful in interpreting the story. So Susa, this is where the banquet is, and it says to double underline geographical locations. What I do, I used to do this, but now I've gotten away from that where I say, okay, what verse does it say? Chapter in verse 1? Verse 2. Verse 2. So you have verse 2. Is where you find the location, right? So what I do is when I mark the locations, okay, I'm lying. I'm talking about time statements. Forget I said that about this. We'll go back to this. So yes, double underline locations, okay? Because I still do that. My mind is like, new room, I guess. But we'll go back to this later when we get to talk about time statements. So, double underline geographical locations. We have, in verse 1, what other geographical locations do you see?
He ruled from India to Ethiopia.
Okay, from India to Ethiopia. And if you look at your map, you can see just the size of that area, from India to Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is over here on the far left, and India is over here on the far right. And so he has 127 provinces in this area, okay? And Now, where is this banquet taking place? In Susa,
Pretty much in the middle.
It's in the middle.
in the middle. So here's Susa. So that's where his palace is. And he's called all these people from here to come to the palace so that he can display everything that he has. Okay? So when you underline geographical locations, it broadens the picture for you. Okay, so you look at the map and you say, well, where is that? And you see his reign, his kingdom was from here to here. And so he's having this banquet right in the middle. Everybody's coming to Congress. You know, it's like they're coming from all over, you know, to this banquet. So we have where it's happening. Number 5, one last thing. It says, is there a reference that tells us when the event is taking place?
The third year of his reign,
Okay, the 3rd year of his reign. Where do you see that, Dave?
verse 3.
Verse 3, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet. So, and this is what I want to talk about here. When it says to draw a green circle around this time statement. So if it says 3rd year, what verse is that? Verse 3?
Third, yep.
Okay, so verse 3. So what they're saying is, draw a circle around this. So it's like a clock face that tells you time. Okay. Now I used to do that all the time. But what I do now is I put a green dot next to the verse where there's a time statement. Okay, and that way it's not cluttering up the text as much and it's easier to see. It's just how I do with, remember with the instructions, if there's an instruction in a passage and let's just say that there's an instruction in verse 10, do this. That's the instruction. So the way I mark it is I put a red dot out here next to the line where the instruction is. So it's easy to see. Just easy to see instructions right away. It's easy to see time statements. And that way then I know, oh, there's a time statement here. I just look over there. It's like, it's the 3rd year. Okay, that just kind of simplifies it. That's just my own thinking. So you may do as you like, and you may not mark anything if that's your style. Okay? So it's happening in the 3rd year. So under when, put 3rd year. So now we have who, what, where, and when. Just try to take this chapter apart a little bit and start to get the story in our head. So that's day 1 of the homework. That's day 1. Day 2. Any questions about day 1? Okay. Day 2. Number 1. I'm going to skip that paragraph. It talks about it's good to read things over again. Read the chapter again. Read the chapter again. Read the chapter again. And I would suggest that when you go home and start doing the rest of this, you read chapter 1 again and just kind of go over what we talked about. But just to read it one more time. So it says read chapter 1 again, and this time mark the main characters. Mark the king and mark the queen. 2 different colors or 2 different, like you could do a circle on one and a square on the other. If we have king and queen, Queen Vashti. So you could easily just do like the king and the queen. So all the way through the chapter you would mark them to say, okay, this is talking about the king, this is talking about the queen. Now what else would you mark if you're marking king and queen, their names? Pronouns. If a pronoun, he is talking about the king, you're going to mark that as well. So pronouns. And what this is going to do, just to refresh our memories about why we do this, it's going to help you to identify everything about the king. What did we learn about the king? Because we're going to make a list, and it's like doing a character study and listing everything that you learn about him. So it's creating a big picture. And it's going to give you the relationship between these characters. And in the rest of the story, we're going to be adding characters. So you always want to get as much information out of the chapter as you can about the main characters to start to develop this picture of who they are and what's happening. So I'm going to give you, let's do this together. We'll just do this together verbally. And you have a chart on page, oops, I have a number here. On page 73, where it says the main characters in the book of Esther. The main characters in the book of Esther. So as we read, let's look at only looking for what we see about the king and about Vashti. So in chapter 1, it says, now it took place in the days of the king who reigned from what? India to Ethiopia. So you're going to put down on your list the first thing we see about this king is what? So chapter 1, verse 1. King, we're going to identify him, King A, etc. Okay. What do you learn about him? What fact?
His kingdom.
Okay, his
The
kingdom.
geography
So
of his kingdom.
he reigned,
From India to Ethiopia.
okay, India to Ethiopia. Is it I-O?
Yes.
Okay. So you have identified the king and where he reigns. Any other facts about him? You could put also 127 provinces if you wanted. Okay, where's the next verse where we see the king mentioned?
Verse 2.
Verse 2. What do you see about him in verse 2?
His royal throne was in Susa.
Okay, so his throne in Susa. So that's going to be where his palace is. In verse 3, what do we learn about him?
He gave a banquet in his 3rd year.
Okay, so in verse 3, he holds a banquet in his 3rd year. Who was this banquet for?
Everyone in Susa, from the greatest to the least.
Okay, everyone in Susa from the greatest to the least. Everyone in Susa?
Persia.
Persia means.
Okay, Persia and Media. Okay, what does that tell you? Do those two words mean anything to you?
Other provinces, I believe.
Okay, those are geographical locations, right? Persia and Media. So you have here on your map, Media, Persia. So you don't need to make this list extensive. You don't want to rewrite scripture. You're just pulling out facts. So we're seeing, okay, here's the king, here's his kingdom, this is where his throne is, he's throwing a banquet.
So were Persia and Media part of his kingdom? I mean, they're farther north,
Ethiopia.
because it was farther north than India and Ethiopia straight across, but it's by Susa. Okay, I got it.
Okay, then let's move on. Where do we see him mentioned again?
Verse 4.
Okay, verse
Oh,
4.
Oh, no, we didn't do this.
Display, he shows off his riches.
Okay, so at this banquet in verse 4, he's displaying his riches. Right?
Yes.
And how long was the banquet?
180 days.
Okay, 180
Heck of a party.
days. I bet they ran out of pizza at times. Yeah, 180 days. Okay, what about the next place we see him?
When
Verse
that-
5.
Yeah, he gives another
Okay,
banquet.
5.
It's the after party.
Okay, so he has another banquet, right? Another banquet. How do you know this is another banquet?
Because it's after the other, it's
Yeah.
after, when the days are completed.
After, yeah, when this was completed, that's a time statement. So after this,
This was a short one.
okay, how short was it?
7 days.
Okay, 7 days. And who was invited to this one?
Everybody at Sousa.
Okay, so this one was everybody at Sousa, from the greatest to the least. The first one was for who?
First one was for the princes and attendants and the army officers.
Okay, so this was like the upper echelon of people at the first
Oh, the
banquet.
nobles.
Okay, and the nobles. But the second one is for, and this one was for Media, right? All of these, Persia. So far-reaching. The second banquet is for Susa, more local. Is that right? So I'm clear, there's two separate banquets going on here. Okay, where do we see the king mentioned next? Well, who did we run into in verse 9?
Vashti.
Okay, Vashti. We have the queen. What's the queen doing?
She's
Also
giving
the
a banquet
banquet.
for the women.
Okay, so this is going to be on a separate list. So on your page, like I drew a column down the middle. So
Too late.
the king is here. Oh, sorry, Carol.
Yeah, I don't know.
The king is here. Or you can do it, well,
Hamburger style.
I should have told you that before.
Whoops.
We'll just
You
draw
know
a
what?
line
Turn
down.
the page over.
Or you could do it on the back of your
Turn the
hat.
page over. Because it's the same thing on the other side. So you can do, one side is the king, and the next side is the queen. Or you can split it like I did here, and do king and queen. Okay, because the thing we're going to do is add to this with every chapter. So we want to leave room for chapters 2 through 8. Okay? So, right now we run into the queen, and I'm going to just change color here just so we have another page. Verse 6. So what do we learn about the queen?
She gave a
Verse
banquet for the
9.
women in the palace.
That's in 9.
Oh, 9. Well, it's upside 6 and 9 are like, if you turn it around. Be so picky, Dave. Verse 9. Vashti is the queen. She gave banquet. And who did she hold the banquet for?
The women in the palace.
The women in the palace. Okay? The women in the palace. Let's see what time is it here. Okay.
41.
So let's just go fast forward a little bit to verse 12. Well, verse 10 you have that the king commands her to come. Okay. Verse 12, what happens?
She refuses.
She refused to
She
give to the men.
refuses. So in verse 12, she refuses to come. Refuses the king's command. in verse 12, verse 10 you would have on the king's list, but I'm out of space here, that he commanded her to come, to be brought to him. She refused the command. Verse 12, what do you see about the king?
Yeah, angry.
Okay, he got angry. He got not just angry,
Wrathful.
okay, he was very angry, and wrath burned within him because she refused to come.
Will we find out later why we have to have all the names of the individual people who were advisors and wise men?
I don't know if we'll find that out or not. We're going to look for those guys. Yeah, because they're all named, which is interesting. They're all named in there, so we'll see. But they're not the main characters. So we're focusing on the main characters. Okay, so you get the idea of making a list. We're gathering facts about these two main characters. The two main characters. On this list, what happens when we make a list too is that it leads us to, well, number one, we're like, okay, I'm getting this idea of the king, who he is, where he reigns, what he's doing, and of the queen. She's the reigning queen. She's throwing a banquet for all the women in the castle. She's refused the invitation, the command of the king to come. So that creates, you know the rest of the story there. That creates this issue. And all of the people are like, we can't let the queen set the standard for how all the women are going to respond. So, but what happens also is you see the character of each person, you see the picture developing, but you also begin to see repeated words, other like themes that are in this chapter. So if you just look at this list, what do you see? A word that has been repeated that might be a subject that we should look at.
Bank-
Banquets. So we see that there's 3 banquets being given in this chapter. So because that's a subject, it's like this is a keyword. Keywords reveal subjects in the text. It's like, okay, we're going to figure out what is it saying about the banquet. And so as you look at the banquet, you're going to say, here's number 1 banquet. On page 77, it says banquets in the book of Esther. Banquets in the book of Esther. So we're going to list, let me get back to your homework so I can be on the same page with you. Yeah, so this is on page 4, and it's number 3. And it talks about these key words. And keyword is going to give you a subject that's being discussed here, and this is the subject. Everything revolves around the banquets, right? Everything happened right here at the banquet. So then what you want to do is on that page, it says to list what you learned about the banquets. So the first banquet is here. So you're just going to kind of list the facts about this banquet. When did it happen? Who was invited? How long did it last? Just basic facts.
We're not going to divide this in half.
I didn't.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I just did it. Banquet 1, banquet 2, banquet 3. The thing with the people is because you're going to do a continuation of that list throughout the text. So, and then it's just easier to, when I have them side by side. So then you have the second banquet. Again, just list the basic facts, who was invited, different group of people, how long did it last. Third banquet, totally different from the one that the king gave, and just list the facts. So that's what they're asking you to do about keywords. And then when you just look at that list on keywords, you begin to see about the banquets. What can I learn about the banquets? If you did not see that clearly when you were looking at people, you're going to see it clearly when you look at events. This is a historical book. You're going to look at facts about people and events. So the events that happen here are the banquets. And by listing out the facts about them, then you get a clear picture of 3 separate banquets, who was invited, who then was there when the king commanded her to come and she refused. Why is that significant? What's the example that she is setting? Okay? As you move through the homework, it's going to also ask you on day 3 to mark another key word. So I just want you to understand what key words are. Is there a subject that's going to be talked about throughout? So I'm going to let you finish those lists on your own, but I want to move to page 5, the end of day 2, so that you get a sense of how to do this. On page 4 at the bottom it says a paragraph consists usually of 1 or more sentences that are connected by a common thought or subject. When studying the book of the Bible, it is very helpful to summarize the main thought, event, or teaching of each paragraph. This is called the theme of the paragraph. So let's do that now. So what you have on the next page is the breakdown of the paragraphs. If you look at your text, you'll notice that the numbers are bolded. The numbers are bolded where there's a new paragraph starting. That's why that number is bolded. So in verse 1 it should be a bold 1, and verse 5 should be a bold, right? So the first paragraph is verse 1 through 4. So let's just kind of summarize what is in that paragraph. 1 through 4. What would you say that those verses are about? What's the event that takes
It's
place?
about the banquet,
Okay, it's about the banquet.
first banquet.
The first banquet. So you could just put there, king gives banquet for, I put king gives banquet for nobles, etc. Just generally, just a small statement about it. It's going to help us, we're just kind of outlining the chapters, what we're doing. King gives banquet for nobles. What about then in 5 through 9? What's the event?
King gives banquet for Susa.
Okay, so he gives a banquet for Susa, for all the people. From
Though it's men only, right?
but it's men only, yeah. So it's not really for all the people. The greatest man to the least man. But you see a different group of people. Okay, so he gives a banquet in Susa for all the men people. Okay, then in the next paragraph, 10 through 12, how would we summarize that?
He summons the queen, but she refuses.
Okay, he summons the queen, but she refuses. And then 13 through 20.
Clarification of the law.
Okay, clarification of the law. So this is where he's consulting the wise men to get clarification. What should we do? What's to be done about this? And after he consults with them, you have 21 and 22. Conclusion of this chapter, what would we say about that?
saying that every man should be master of his own house?
Okay, so he proclaims this edict, sends out the edict, the letters throughout his territory that every man should be master of his own house. And what were they going to do with Queen Vashti?
Having deposed.
Yeah, she was deposed. They said that she should not be allowed to come anymore to the king's presence and that someone more worthy should replace her. So now, if you look at that little chart that you just did, you have a summary of this chapter. You see the king throws a banquet for the nobles, then he throws a banquet for all the people in Susa, then he commands to bring the queen so that he can show off how beautiful she is. Then she doesn't come, and then he consults with the wise men to say, what are we going to do about this? And then they all agree that he should send out this edict that every man should be the master of his own house. So that's kind of a summary of the whole chapter. Now, if we were going to tie that all up into one chapter theme, one chapter title, so in page 79, you have this at a glance chart. So we're going to have a chapter theme. So when we finish this, we'll have a chapter theme for every chapter in the story, and then it's kind of like what we just did with the paragraph themes. You've got a running story. You can see the book of Esther by the themes that you choose to title the paragraphs. It just helps you to remember the book as a whole. So if it's not something you have been doing, this is a good time to practice doing that because it's just a short book. Okay? So we talk about, in your homework, it talks about the chapter theme, and number 5 on page 5. It says, now you have the themes of the paragraphs. So what is the theme, the main subject or event covered in Esther chapter 1? If you wanted to remember what this chapter is all about, how would you title it? So how would you title this chapter? We've broken it down into little pieces. He throws a banquet, he commands her to come, she refuses, he consults with the wise men, he puts out an edict, okay? So now, we summarize all of that into one chapter theme. In number A, letter A, it says, write it out in as few words as possible. If you can, it is always best to use words from the text, as it will help you better remember the content of the chapter. For example, you could title it, A King and Queen Throw 3 Celebrations. Okay, did that happen? A king and queen throw 3 celebrations. 1, 2, 3, king, queen. So all that happened in chapter 1. That would make you think, oh, I remember now all these banquets happened in this chapter. But look at the next thing. It says, or king gives a banquet, Queen Vashti refuses to come. Okay, so it says, while the first title is true, the latter uses terms from the text, banquet rather than celebration. Okay, banquet is the key word, rather than celebration, and is more specific, noting the names of the key people and the problem at the second banquet. So with the second title, you have the king, main character, the queen, main character. They throw a banquet. It gives a banquet. The queen refuses to come. And that states who are the main characters, what's the problem. So that kind of ties up chapter 1. This is the issue. So you see where that's a better title than King and Queen Throw 3 Celebrations? Okay. Because it's stating the problem.
So since there's like a solution that she's disposed, seems like that would be part of it maybe too.
Yeah, you could do that. You want to keep your titles short so that you remember them. And if you know, if you see that and you say, okay, the king gives a banquet and the queen refuses to come, you're like, oh yeah, she refused to come and now I remember what happened. It caused a huge problem and the whole kingdom was kind of turned upside down because of that. So it's just something that's going to trigger in your mind what that chapter is about. And because you have done the previous paragraphs, you know right away. It's like, oh yes, this is what happened. Okay? So today's just a little bit of a methodology. How do we do this? How do we take this apart? How does it help us to see the bigger picture and pull out all the details? So that's day 1 and day 2. So again, what I would suggest when you start working on it at home, read through chapter 1 again, look at your homework assignments, and just kind of solidify that in your mind, and then move on to day 3. Any questions about what we've done? Any comments? Just getting into the story, Esther, and the issue with the king. Okay? Great. Thank you so much.